Welcome to each and every one of you. My name is Tyrone Squires, Managing Director of Transparent RX. The title of the webinar you should be able to see there on your screen. If you cannot, please let me know. I've been running this webinar now at least 6 or 7 years, and I typically have some walk-up music. Today I was close to playing a little James Brown, Godfather of Soul, The Big Payback. I thought better of it because it gets me going. And I could end up talking for an hour, hour and a half straight about an issue that I have a lot of passion about. I'm going to share some of that with you today. I'm going to try and keep this to 30, 35 minutes today because I want to hold your attention. All right, just a little bit about me before I dive in. I started in this business, and this is important because I want you to be able to trust the source of the information. I started in this business about 2002 as a pharmaceutical sales rep, eventually landing into the corporate offices where for a short period I led a market access team that was charged with getting our branded diabetes portfolio of products onto the PBMs formulary. I negotiated rebates with PBMs while working for a drug manufacturer. I later left Eli Lilly, this is in 2005 or so, and started my own mail order pharmacy. Learned a lot about uh, contracting and prices, sitting at the table with big drug wholesalers. Learned a lot about the reimbursements coming back from PBMs to independent pharmacies. I'm not a hypocrite. I don't do that well. And so now being frustrated by kind of being squeezed in between those behemoth industries, I decided if you can't beat them, join them, and started the first fiduciary model pharmacy benefit manager, the company. The reason the Big Payback song by James Brown is appropriate is because now the writing's on the wall. There's been a shift. State of Ohio suing PBMs. PBMs paying the state of Mississippi and Ohio millions of dollars for the games that they played, and now it's payback time. Today, you're going to learn a little bit about some of those hidden tactics that delay care and increase costs for both the plan sponsor and their members. So today is not about transparent RX. It is about eliminating wasteful spending in pharmacy benefits. If you have any questions, there's two ways you can get those questions to me. You can send them to me via chat, which you have that option on your control panel there. And then you can also, everyone's muted for obvious reasons, and then you can also raise your hand. There's a raise hand feature on your control panel that you see here. And then I can unmute you and we can have a conversation. By the end of this presentation, three things. I want you to know how PBMs make money. I want you to feel something other than indifference about what you learned today. And then I want you to take some action around what you learned today. That action is going to be primarily around solving the pricing problem, and it is complicated. It is extremely complicated. Whenever we ask a plan sponsor, what's your most pressing problem around your pharmacy, your employer sponsored pharmacy program, inevitably is going to come back price. either directly or indirectly, is going to come back price, maybe transparency, because PBMs for a decade and a half have intentionally made it difficult to determine or calculate what they're being paid. I could never understand why a purchaser would get into such an expensive arrangement with an entity and not want to know how much they're paying that entity to provide the service. For the life of me, I could never understand that. That is different, as you'll learn here today, than what the final plan cost amounts to. That is different. This is an example of how PBMs make it difficult to ascertain what their service fee is, what their management fee is, what they're being paid. It is so very critical, and rarely does it get evaluated in a procurement process. It is you taking time out of your day to learn about these things that is going to change that. This is an email that I was a part of from a director of compensation of benefits at a very large organization, supposedly a sophisticated one. And this particular organization couldn't get its own claims data. Couldn't get its own claims data. And let me tell you, everyone was in on it. You're going to learn why that's important here in a second. So this is an example of information asymmetry. And let me explain what information asymmetry is before I go any further. It's an economic theory or phrase that says when one party has access to information that another party doesn't have access to, the party with the information is going to use it to its advantage. It is going to leverage that information to its financial advantage. That is what this particular PBM is doing. That is what this coalition is doing. It's not sour grapes. I'm competitive by nature, but more important than that, I can't stand when people have more knowledge than someone else or have an advantage and then they don't play fair. This is an example of information success. This is a report that all of our clients receive when rebates are due to be paid to them. If you're a plan sponsor out there and you've never seen this, then kudos to you. You can start now. It details at the claim level all the money a manufacturer has paid to us. It's an explanation of payments. And so this is usually populated, right? But privacy concerns here. We've redacted it for the purposes today, but our clients get all this information filled out. It is the claims that were eligible to receive a rebate or a refund from the manufacturer, and then it has those details: NDC, field date, quantity, and then most importantly, the amount of the rebate that was paid compared to what was guaranteed. If a PBM is not sharing this, then it is making it difficult to determine what they're actually keeping, which contributes to higher costs. So this leads me to the status quo. The status quo, this is just one example, but the status quo is this. Non-fiduciary PBMs, or those that are not radically transparent, want to get its clients into an arrangement where the administrative fee is artificially too low. In some cases, there's no charge on the administrative fee, not a penny. In other cases, it might be $1 per paid claim, or $2 per paid claim, or even $3 per paid claim. You could factor it out to a PEPM or PMPM. At the end of the month, it's all going to come out to be very, very close. And then when that happens, it is essentially giving that PBM the green light to then go in the back end and augment that artificially too low admin fee to do what? To generate its management fee, or in other words, to generate its service fee. What it is going to be paid, and I can promise you, the contribution margin of a PBM's fee to the plan's final cost, if you're not careful, is huge. I'm going to show you a perfect example here in about 15 minutes. This is another example of the previous slide here, where and why it's so important to get that rebate remittance report, the explanation of payments, some way to verify and get full disclosure of the money coming back from the manufacturer to the PBM. Without that, you're overpaying. Your clients are overpaying. There's a reason the PBM doesn't want to disclose that information. And as you can see in that email that I should, listen, don't let them hang their hats on it's proprietary, it's business intelligence. That's crap. We all know we all know what the drugs cost. You can buy access to that information. PBMs aren't manufacturing the drugs. In most cases, we don't even take inventory of the drugs. The primary reason for not sharing the data is they don't want their clients to be able to know just how bad the arrangement is. They don't want you to be able to go to market and compare apples to apples to determine whether or not you got an actual fair deal. And so you can see here in this particular example, the manufacturer revenue is essentially 50% of the PBM's profit. 50%. This is a second source that illustrates the same number. This is a second source that essentially illustrates the same number. And you can see here, I was with Eli Lilly during this time here, right? And it was the small molecule brand drugs generating at that time the PBM profits. And then when you got smarter and cut that source of revenue off, PBMs then shifted that cost to, remember when the PBMs went mandatory mail, there were no laws on the books that prohibited PBMs from doing that, so they forcing everyone to go mail. Well, then when that got shut off, then PBMs went to specialty drug rebates. And now that window or leaky faucet is being closed. And now these PBMs, integration is, got to be, integrated, the PBM, the ASO, and the carrier all under one roof. There's pros and cons to that. I won't get into that today. But now, because this is getting smaller as we speak, It's getting smaller. PBMs have now moved that to what's called MBDCs, medical benefit drug claims. It's the wild, wild west. It is the wild, wild west. It may sound like I'm bashing PBMs. I'm not. PBMs offer a very valuable service. My issue then are the hidden cash flows to PBMs. And so a fiduciary PBM charges a realistic administrative fee. Everything else we negotiate goes back to the client. But on the flip side, again, non-fiduciary PBMs, hidden cash flows are a huge revenue stream. It's important to understand the PBM business model before I go any further here. And so pharmacy, and I'm going to start with contractual relationship. PBMs contract with pharmacies to have sites from which prescriptions can be dispensed to our plan participants. They're either contracted pharmacies, or they can be wholly owned subsidiaries of the PBM in the form of a mail order pharmacy or a specialty pharmacy. We have to have clients to provide these services to. Those clients are third-party payers, large groups, unions, some cases coalitions that I just mentioned about 5 minutes ago, municipality, state, and even federal governments. Federal government can be a client. Now, let me touch on the financial flow. And when you look at this model, keep in mind, again, I mentioned it, we're middlemen. Unless we own a pharmacy, we don't take control of the product. There's no inventory. There's no inventory. Pharmacy benefit managers reimburse pharmacies for those prescriptions that were dispensed, and then we bill our clients for those dispensed prescriptions. There's three problems here, and I'm focusing on everything to the right of kind of the center here. There's three problems here. The first one, the inflow of cash in the form of rebates, and you'll learn here in a second why that happens, is too low. You just saw from two different reputable sources that PBM profits, 50% comes from the manufacturer. They are rebates, they are refunds. That the third-party payer and the health plan are entitled to every single penny, except for maybe data fees. That one I wouldn't argue too much. But everything else goes back to the third-party payer or the health plan. The second problem is the outflow of cash in the form of reimbursements for ingredient costs is too high. More about that here in a second. The third problem is this. Look who sits at the very top of this entire diagram. You do. Your clients do. And yet, you know the least about how it works. It is a recipe for overpayments to the PBM. I talked about information asymmetry. It is the primary problem. I've yet to meet a dumb person in this industry. You may disagree with me on that, but I've yet to meet a dumb person in this industry on this side of the aisle. It is not because you're not intelligent that you don't understand it. It's just the information hasn't been made available to you intentionally so that you can figure out what the heck is going on. In that slide that I shared with you, and I promise you this is the truth, where that director of compensation and benefits was told by their broker, who has a pharmacy department within their firm, that they couldn't get access to the data from their own firm to give to that client. In my conversations during a similar kind of sales presentation or discovery call with that director of compensation and benefits, he point blank said, education isn't going to help. It was horrifying to hear that, with so much at stake and so many people under him relying on the decisions that he and the other members of the steering committee make. It is education that prevents one from getting into such an arrangement in the first place. I talked about the second problem, reimbursements being too high. The drug pricing standard, which forms the basis for most PBM arrangements, is AWP. It is the basis from which a third-party payer or a health plan's cost is established. The problem with it is it's a grossly elevated price, list price, that no one pays. I'm focusing on generic drugs because 90% of the drugs being dispensed in this country are generic. And if the price basis is going to be used by the PBM to generate hidden cash flow for itself in the form of a spread, it's going to primarily come from generic drugs. Those two prices or bases or benchmarks are going to be AWP or MAC. AWP is a list price, kind of like the sticker price on an automobile, and then you negotiate or pay down from there, getting close to invoice costs, right? And then you've got MAC, which is essentially a flat, it's a price that represents transactional cost. AWP does not. MAC is MAC. There's still issues embedded in MAC though. I post this on my blog, the Employer's Guide blog to Overseeing PBMs, every Thursday. We update it every Thursday. What you're looking at now is old, probably a few years. But it doesn't change what I'm about to explain. There's a large gap between AWP and what pharmacies actually pay to put the product on the shelf. Even if you negotiate or achieve an 80 or 85% generic effective rate discount, there's still a large opportunity for the PBM to take a large share of that, thereby raising your cost. So let's take a look here. Let me see here. I'm going to go with levothyroxine here. And so take a look at the AWP, right? So you got two price benchmarks. You've got $561 for the AWP, right? Let's call it 560 is the AWP price. Horrible dollar sign. Let's say you're able to negotiate an 85% effective rate discount off of AWP for all generic drugs. That's essentially going to get us right around $475 or so discount, leaving $85 as the third-party payer's cost. That's your cost based upon 85%. I can tell you, depending upon the PBM you've hitched your wagon to, it's likely you're paying less than you're getting less than 80% or somewhere right around there. And 2 or 3% is a huge deal. It's a lot of money. But take a look at what the pharmacy paid to put that exact product on the shelf. $4. $4 they paid the wholesaler, or if they're large enough, to go direct to the manufacturer to put that product on the shelf. And I'm going to say this was through a wholesaler. If it was direct through the manufacturer, it probably would have been maybe $3, $3.50, somewhere in there. But the point being here is that the PBM could give the pharmacy 100% markup, maybe even 150% markup. Let's call it, and you may be thinking that the pharmacies are making more money than that. No, they're not. If that were the case, the Supreme Court last year wouldn't have ruled that PBMs could no longer hide under ERISA. They can be regulated by states. That was driven by the National Community Pharmacists Association, because independent pharmacies were being driven out of business because far too often the reimbursements coming back from the PBM to those pharmacies didn't even cover the drug cost. Forget the overhead, just the drugs cost. So I'm being generous here. I once owned a mail order pharmacy. I know how painful it is to be reimbursed less than what you paid. So I don't want to do that because I'm no hypocrite. So I'm going to mark it up 100%, 150%. And let's just call it an even $10. That would still leave, folks, a $75 spread if this product were not on the PBM's MAC list. If it is on the MAC list, let's say on the MAC list, for MAC, let's say the cost would be $15. The out of pocket for the PBM doesn't change. The PBM keeps $5. Now just start to imagine now, if you've got 5,000 claims running through every month just for generics, and each one of those claims gave the PBMs $5 in their pocket. That's $300,000 a year that should go back in the form of lower costs that you reimburse the PBM for. Case in point, and I'm doing pretty good here on time. I'm going to speed up. You want to stick around. The very last 2 or 3 slides are the most critical, and it's why you're here today. The state of Ohio, like I said, they are suing PBMs. They've got lawsuits out with these 2 PBMs that you see on your screen here. And for the record, I got no issue with these companies per se. I'm sure they treat their employees well, return profits to their shareholders, all of that stuff. My issue is the business models. I think they're old. And they need to be disrupted. The state of Ohio pivoted. For years, they would evaluate PBM proposals based upon what? AWP discounts, minimum guaranteed rebates, a qualitative standpoint, maybe looking at, call center and, account support, clinical programs, although you can put a number on those. But primarily from a cost standpoint, discounts off of AWP, minimum rebate guarantees, maybe even they used WAC, which is a list price, but the number is lower than AWP. But they decided to pivot and said, no, we want to understand how much we're paying you. How much are you putting in your bank account for what the services we've hired you to perform? When they looked at this and uncovered just in spreads, almost $250 million, they terminated the contracts almost overnight. And if Greg were here today and just, talking in a safe environment, he would tell you it's not information we've never had before. It was information we never looked at or asked to be looked at before. Contract language, very important. Again, if you're putting the contract at the end of your RFP, you might ask for it in the beginning, but you really don't pay attention to it until the very end after you've selected a finalist. Big problem. It contributes to information asymmetry. Contract should be front and center from beginning to end and the primary focal point in any PBM procurement process. PBMs can have multiple MAC lists. And when that happens, the employer's MAC list is less comprehensive and it's less aggressive than the pharmacy's MAC list, which means that your MAC list or your client's MAC list, the prices are going to be higher than the more aggressive pharmacy MAC list. The prices are going to be lower. That leads to the spread. One of our students in our course, after the course was over, went to one of the PBMs and one of the larger PBMs and asked, just how many MAC lists do you have? And the answer came back 40 or so. And then they elaborated and said, but we're trying to get that down. What? PBMs can have different MAC lists among their own clients, let alone the pharmacies. Rebates, very important. Again, I showed you the rebate remittance report. We've talked about how PBMs intentionally make it difficult to ascertain their fees. One reason why they may be reluctant to share that rebate remittance report or an explanation of payments detailing at the claim level, NVC, date, claim number, day supply, is because when negotiating with manufacturers, they are having those dollars renamed for the primary purpose of not being contractually obligated to pay it back. In the diagram, the U.S. Pharmacy Reimbursement and Distribution System, when I said that the incoming cash was too low, if you remember on that line below it, it had formulary rebates. That's oftentimes what gets passed back, maybe 90%, in some cases 100%, but not enough do these other names get accounted for. And when they are not, guess what? The PBM keeps it. That's where 50% of the profit from the manufacturer is coming from. In the contract language, definitions are the foundation for transparency in PBM contracts, point blank. And rebates or manufacturer revenue is one of those definitions. And you have to have it say any and all revenue received by the PBM from any pharmaceutical manufacturer includes, but is not limited to, boom, 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 boom. This was, I think I made this available as part of the webinar today, but this was made public because Express Scripts sued this specialty drug maker, the maker of Evzio. The product that they make is actually, it's the pen, it's the injection mechanism, but the product inside is a generic drug that can be had for pennies. They were charging thousands of dollars for this, but Express Scripts sued for rebate payments or refunds it believed it was owed that Kaleo refused to pay. Kaleo owed the money. They just didn't want to pay. They didn't think Express Scripts would sue and then make it public information. But you can see here, look at the formulary rebates compared to the administrative fees. They are dwarfed by the administrative fees. These administrative fees are not the same fees that are paid on a per claim basis, for claims adjudication, eligibility, member support, account management, access to a member portal. That's different. And that's what makes this complicated. This administrative fee, in this case, is solely between the PBM and the manufacturer. It has got nothing to do with claims adjudication other than you need a paid claim to be eligible for a rebate. This is that same lawsuit, and it even breaks down these additional rebates here, right? Price protection rebates. But you can see here the price protection rebates are essentially, this is why Kaleo Express Scripts sued Kaleo, because of the price protection rebates that say if your drug's list price goes up by a certain percent in a short time period, then the rebate or refund you owe us goes up as well and coincides with your price increase. And because of that, for one drug, from one relatively small drug maker, $5 million just for price protection rebates. Outcomes rebates, again, you'll see this in PBM contracts. It'll talk about clinical program fees, value-based programs, performance-based programs. It won't jump off the page at you that the PBM has entered into a contract with the manufacturer that says, in this example, if Januvia doesn't help the patient reach a certain A1C level, measuring blood glucose levels, then you owe us a refund. So this is another type of rebate that contributes to that 50% profit percent that PBMs are earning and keeping, but those dollars should be going back to the plan sponsor to what? To get to lowest net cost. And so, like the state of Ohio, The bottom line is understanding how much money the PBM is putting in its bank account. You have to trust this. You have to trust this. When we go, we take the members and our clients, and we go to manufacturers, and sometimes we pull that buying power with a rebate aggregator that consolidates the buying power from multiple organizations, like the boutique PBM from like Transparent Art, health systems, maybe smaller regional health plans, and pulls it and goes to the manufacturer and says, here, let's talk. The same thing with pharmacies. We pull our buying power, and we go to CVS, and we go to Walgreens, and we go to the independents, and we say, let's talk on what you're willing to accept in terms of reimbursement. And those deals are set in stone, folks. They're set in stone. And so it doesn't matter how happy or unhappy you are with our services, those rates don't change until the deal comes up for renewal. And so essentially, what you are negotiating for, hear me now, is what you are going to allow the PBM to keep. That's where the sophistication comes in. That's where eliminating information asymmetry comes in. Because that undisclosed amount, here's the genius of it all. Here's what the state of Ohio uncovered. The genius of it all is that the PBM's take home is hidden in the plan's final cost. You think it's the drugs. You think it's the drugs, but in some cases, the PBM's take home contributes more to your costs than does the ingredient cost, the drugs themselves. Wait for me for a second. This is public information. I found it online. CVS's CEO, Q2 2018 earnings call, said this, right? They always talk about we're transparent, tell you what you want to hear. They even show you what you want to see. They give you the optics. But then those optics hide the true costs. Never or rarely does when a PBM share information, does it share how much they're being paid. The CEO said this: we underwrite contracts, overall level of profitability, and many levers available to pull depending on the preferences of the client. In layman's terms, and see, there's that word again, the third word. In layman's terms, this means we are going to make as much money as we possibly can. The amount of money that we are going to make as much money as we possibly underwrite contracts. The amount of money that we are going to make is going to depend on how sophisticated or unsophisticated our clients are. The clients that eliminate information asymmetry pay less. Those that allow it to run rampant overpay grossly. I've talked about the PBM service fee and the PBM management fee, and I'm wrapping up here. The most important slide is coming up. This is a formula that we created. And essentially everything in green at some point lands in the PBM's bank account. I could even add another one here called DIR and replace that with dispensing fees, but now we're getting into kind of advanced stuff. But let's just call it dispensing fees today. Everything in green at some point lands in the PBM's bank account. A cash disbursement out of the PBM's bank account, an example would be, show me what you've learned today. A share of rebates going from the PBM, from the manufacturer to the PBM back to the third-party payer. That's an example of a cash disbursement. Another example, remember the U.S. Pharmacy Reimbursement and Distribution System would be the PBM reimbursing a pharmacy in its network for a prescription that it dispensed to the PBM's plan participant. That is a cash disbursement. Whatever, remember, I gave you the kind of the rundown that we negotiate with pharmacy networks, we negotiate with manufacturers, whatever's left over, right? Whatever's left over is what the PBM is being paid. That is this formula. What we negotiate and then what we charge you. And if we charge you more than what we negotiate, that difference is the earnings after cash disbursements, a fancy way of saying the PBM's management fee. The new path says this: it's time to put away the status quo, these antiquated business models, and make it transparent, radically transparent, not just transparent, radically transparent, eliminating information asymmetry. After all, we're just the middlemen. Who are we to say that you can't know what we're collecting from the PBM? Who are we to say you can't know what we're reimbursing a pharmacy and then charging you? Right? You know what we're charging you, but you don't know what we're paying a pharmacy for that same claim. You should know. So the new path says this: the PBM makes money one way. Instead of an artificially too low administrative fee, now it's reasonable. Now we're talking at least $6 per paid claim and then going up from there. We brought this client on last year, and coming in, their PMPM was 5788. After the first full year with us, the PMPM is 2312. That difference of 5788 minus 2312, or essentially $35 PMPM, is what Prime was paying itself to be the PBM. The most frightening thing about this, I said it earlier, that $35 PMPM is higher than our all-in cost. It includes the ingredient cost, it includes our fee, it includes the rebates. All in, their PMPM that they were paying themselves was higher than the all-in with us, including the drugs. Their PMPM was higher than what the stinking drugs cost. Education is the key, folks. I promise you that this would only be about you and getting more knowledge around the pharmacy benefit. The only thing that I will say is if you're interested in learning more, and you want to be recognized for what you know. Not only were we the first fiduciary model PBM, it was in our interests that people get smarter. Right? That's the only way fiduciary wins, is when folks understand just how bad it is when they're dealing with an entity that isn't fiduciary or doesn't provide radical transparency. We were first to do that, and we were the first to teach people what they didn't know. So if you're interested in learning more, go out on the web, look up Pharmacy Benefit Institute of America, and this course is backed by the University of Kentucky College of Pharmacy. And so real quick anecdote here as I'm wrapping up, but Eli Broad, I never knew who he was. I was in the business school named after him. I never knew who he was until I read his autobiography, maybe, I don't know, but 5 or 6 years ago. First person, I think still to this day, to be the founder of 2 Fortune 500 companies. He might know a little bit about what he's talking about when he talks about it all starts with education. And I'm closing here. I'm the type of person, and you may be like me, I know nothing about automobiles. Nothing. When I go to get my car repaired, the only defense I have is to act like I know what I'm talking about. And to do that, inevitably, I always get the list of things that they print out that says that the car needs. And then I say, I don't need this, to give the perception that I know what I'm talking about. It is only after a few exchanges of words that the serviceman realizes that I don't know what I'm talking about. So I have to trust that they are going to look out for me and not themselves and try to make as much money as possible. I end up probably declining services that I need and accepting services that I don't. It's the same thing that you do with PBMs. Don't act like you know what's going on. Either learn it yourself, build a culture around it, or make sure the person that you've hired to protect you knows exactly what the heck is going on. It doesn't take long, like me, in a conversation to learn whether or not someone knows what the heck is going on. And the PBM smell blood in the water when they learn that. Don't be like me with your chest stuck out as you walk in, terrified inside because you're going to pay for something that you don't need. Just learn it. Okay, listen, that is my time today. Here's my information. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, email me, contact me on LinkedIn. I'm probably going to be